Hello, hello, hello. I feel like I say this every day. I got a lot of ground to cover, but I really do, Corinne and Robert and Cynthia and Kate and Karen and Thomas and TC and Susan and Derek and Joe. Hello, Joe. Hello, Joe. Joe will be on today's program. Joe has big news. Joe has filed a lawsuit. Great to see her joining us. Yeah, we'll get into that. Well, I said I got a lot to cover today. Parks Casino, that's my casino of choice. They've got it all: action, excitement, headline, entertainment right in the Philly burbs. Thousands of hot slots, a state-of-the-art sports book, beautiful poker room, all-weather beer garden. That's where I did the stories and cigars with Smerconish night. Parks Casino, this is how you win. Okay, you want to talk about mingling? Listen to all your different options. The Isley Brothers are Friday night, tomorrow night. Live in concert is coming. Comedian Gary Owen, comedian Robert Kelly, country artist Ashley McBride, Larry the Cable Guy, The Sounds of Taj Mahal, Clutch in concert, Gary Clark Jr., KC and the Sunshine Band coming to Parks Casino. And then in September, this is really interesting to me, UB40. I went through a UB40 phase many, many moons ago. Check it all out, parkscasino.com. That's how you buy your tickets for all shows. Parks Casino, this is how you win. You've got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, gang, let's do this. There is so much to cover, and I want to begin with yesterday's poll result. Say a couple of words about that before I get into today's poll question, the Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Yesterday, 33,746 votes were cast. Which poses a greater challenge for America's future? Young men's decreasing workforce participation or the decline in manufacturing jobs? And the outcome was 60-40 yesterday. 59.08% said that it is, actually, that's a mistake. That is a mistake. 58, you're going to have to bear with me because my notes say 60-40 negotiating tactic versus permanent fixture, but I think that actually relates to a prior day's result. So bear with me because I want to get this right. Smerconish.com poll question of the day. Let's take a look at the prior poll results. And what do we have? There we go. That's better. 81% said young men's decreasing participation. 19% said decline in manufacturing jobs. Okay. That was the result from yesterday. And the reason that I was asking the question, I think it's obvious, is that President Trump has said that the basis, the reason, the rationale for his tariff policy is that he wants to return manufacturing jobs to the United States. Alicia Finley from the Wall Street Journal caught my eye with a piece that she wrote, chock full of data, where she said, hey, essentially, what makes you think that we can fill those jobs? 40% of small business owners in March reported job openings they can't fill, meaning already. 56% of construction, 53% of transportation, 47% of manufacturing. She noted that the labor force participation, that rate among working age men is 5 percentage points lower than it had been in the 80s, accounting for about 3.5 million fewer men between the ages of 25 and 34 in the workforce. So bottom line is we're at full employment. I mean, we've got jobs for everyone who's willing to work in this country. So if President Trump is successful, and of course we're going to get to that in a moment with everything that happened yesterday, what makes us think we could fill the manufacturing jobs? So we talked in the first hour of the program about the trouble with our men, our young men. And then in the third hour of yesterday's program, Kim Parker, who handles social trends for Pew Research, was my guest. And what caught my eye was a Wall Street Journal story, separate from the Alicia Finley story, that talked about women, younger women, turning away from marriage. A 2022 Pew Research survey of single adults showed only 34% of single women are looking for romance, compared with 54% of single men. Well, now I'm going to paint with a broad brush, but I went through the data with Kim Parker yesterday, and she agreed with me. Why are women less interested than traditionally they've been uh, in marriage? It's because partly the younger men are struggling, and consequently, they're not as attractive to the younger women. And by the way, I'm talking about heterosexual relationships because, and I asked this question of my guest yesterday, they just don't have the data yet as to how much of what I'm saying applies to the LGBTQ plus community, lest you think I'm ignoring, I'm not. They just don't have the numbers. Okay, then what I argued is it's all related. It's all related. The tariff policy, the trouble with young men, women being less interested with marriage. And here's the way that I connect them all. And I'm going to lean on my friend Scott Galloway, Professor G, who will be on my CNN program on Saturday to talk about all these things. I did an interview with him on CNN in 2023, and I have a transcript in front of me, and you'll have to indulge me. Galloway said to me, look, we don't want to talk about it. We hear the word sex, and our brain fires a bunch of different places. But the whole shooting match, the whole reason we have an economy, the whole reason we're focused on creating more prosperous, secure nation is that we can all recognize that the key to a rewarding life, and that is a series of deep, meaningful relationships. And core to that, I'm not saying I'm reading this literally. I'm not saying you have to have this to be happy and productive, but it helps to have a loving partner. And you can look at the most unstable, violent societies in the world, and they all have one thing in common. They all have a disproportionate amount of young men who have no economic opportunity and no opportunity for relationships. And if we're going to have an honest conversation, we need to identify and realize that sex and companionship are huge motivators and guardrails for young men. They've got to put on a shirt, blow dry their hair, get their act together, and get a job. There's more to it, but I think it makes perfect sense. You can't look at the trouble of young men in a vacuum. It's impacting our women as well. We want relationships. Oh, yeah. You know I'm going to say this. We want them mingling. As Scott said, when men aren't engaged in relationships with women and women can't find the men they find, quite frankly, sexually attractive, then we're in trouble. The greatest innovation in history wasn't the computer chip. It wasn't the iPhone. It was the middle class. And the thing that gave birth to the middle class was 7 million men returning from war who are given jobs and money and low interest loans, and quite frankly, demonstrated the heroics and the economic security to be very attractive to a lot of women. And we had a baby boom. The weave. It all makes sense. All right. Last Saturday's poll question. Wait a minute, Michael. Why are you taking us now back to Saturday? It's Thursday. Hang on. On Saturday, will the Trump administration tariffs ultimately be good or bad for the United States? This was the poll where we had 88,171 responses, and 92.21 said bad. Saturday, I asked the question, when it's all said and done, is what Trump's doing going to be good or bad for the United States? Can we call it 90-10? 90-10. I'm revisiting that today with a very similar poll in light of all that transpired yesterday, which Trump hit pause. He announced it in a Truth Social posting that I have in front of me. Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I'm hereby raising the tariff charge to China to 125%, yada, yada, yada. He goes on to say, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And the markets went crazy. I mean, the markets went crazy in a very predictable way because remember when 2 days ago, there was a fake news story and I explained this. There was cheering on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when an erroneous report was given, which said that Trump had paused for 90 days. So the administration knew that if they were to pause, they could turn it all around on a dime, and they did. The S&P ballooned by more than 9%. NASDAQ closed up 12%, its biggest one-day gain in 24 years. The Dow soared nearly 8%, topping 40,000 points. So actually, now let me take you to the Monday poll question, because this is one where I feel secure in my vote. On Monday, I asked, will the Dow Jones Industrial Average close higher or lower this Friday, meaning tomorrow at 4 o'clock, than it did last Friday when it was 38,314? Do you know that 80% who voted at Smerconish.com on Monday thought this Friday, tomorrow, we'd be in even a worse position? That doesn't seem, I mean, unlike March Madness, I think I got this one right when I said, no, I think we're going to be higher on Friday, meaning tomorrow. So last Friday, we closed at 38,000 and change. And yesterday, we closed at 40,608. I feel secure, in as secure as one could be about the market, in saying that the tomorrow will be a better day than was last Friday. Of course, all of this volatility was self-inflicted. All of it was caused by one person, truly a reminder to me of the power that can be wielded by a president of the United States. I often wonder if we overstate, given the checks and balances that theoretically exist, the power of the president, but I'll not say that again. But how's it all going to turn out in the end? Because in the same way that I asked that question last Saturday with the 88,000 who voted and a 90-10 result, now I'm asking, regardless of how he got there, and I very deliberately word today's poll question to say, you don't have to like the methodology, because I don't know anybody who does. But might he end up making it better for the United States? It wasn't by design. I don't accept that it was by design. I asked Peter Navarro on CNN last Saturday. I held up the New York Times front page and I said, Peter, did you anticipate this? Is this where you thought it was going? He didn't answer that question. Yesterday, some in the administration were singing a different tune. I watched Treasury Secretary Bessent essentially say this was all part of the plan. This was all, this is all the way they had schemed it out. I watched Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, come out and say this is the art of the deal. Bessent actually said the pause was not a result of the brutal sell-offs in the financial market, but rather other countries being willing to negotiate. But Trump himself acknowledged that it was because of people, quote unquote, getting yippy. He came out on the South Lawn of the White House surrounded by some NASCAR drivers, and that was the observation that he made. And he also acknowledged that he'd been watching the bond market. The best that I've seen on what went on behind the scenes is the Washington Post, a 4-person byline story today. And what's really interesting about the Washington Post talking about Trump's change of heart is the role that his platform of choice played, Fox News. Because the night before last, so Tuesday night, Sean Hannity had a slew of Republican senators on the program, and they knew that President Trump was watching. And Senator Kennedy from Louisiana at some point in the program just flat out says, I'd like to speak directly now to the President of the United States. I watched some of those clips and I was thinking to myself, if I needed to reach the president, if I were a foreign government, if I were a commercial enterprise and I wanted to get the attention of Donald Trump, the smartest play I could make would be to spend money on Fox and Friends in the morning, assuming he's up because he's not a morning person, and Hannity at night. And that's exactly what transpired. The senators spoke directly to Trump. And then after Hannity's show ended, a number of them had a follow-up conversation with him for an additional hour. Yeah, some of the senators expressed a desire for Trump to negotiate with other countries coming to the table on tariffs. Several of them spoke to the president after the show ended. And this was a show that featured Senator Kennedy, Senator Graham, John Thune, Katie Britt, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, all on Hannity with Trump watching. That and the concerns about the bond market is what caused the president to buckle. Nevertheless, Peter Navarro, who told me last Saturday that, that this it hadn't hit the fan, if you watched the interview or heard my cut, quote, it unfolded exactly the way it should. It's a beautiful thing. Or you also had Bill Ackman. Yesterday, Bill Ackman, the hedge fund investor, the billionaire who had been critical of Trump, now saying this was brilliantly executed by Donald Trump. This was on X, textbook art of the deal. But we know that it wasn't planned out. We know that it wasn't methodical, and this is what they always had in mind for a number of reasons, some of which I've already given you. And another is that Ambassador Jameson Greer, the trade representative, was testifying on Capitol Hill when this all went down yesterday, and it was obvious, and Stephen Horsford, the Democrat from Nevada, got into it with him, maybe a little over the top, frankly, in making clear, hey, you're the trade representative. You didn't even know we were about to put this pause into effect. So I am asking today's poll question. I am asking as today's poll question that where the net as of this moment in time is a blanket tariff for all trading partners of 10%, except China of 125%, sending the Dow spiking over 7% yesterday. The EU has already paused their retaliation. We're not in as good a position as we were before, quote unquote, Liberation Day. But is it possible that when it's all said and done, President Trump has strengthened our hand with our trading partners? So the way that I've worded the poll question today is as follows: setting aside criticism of Trump's approach and style. Setting aside criticism, can you do that? Of Trump's approach and style, do you believe his tariff policies will ultimately benefit the United States? And if you've been paying attention, you should be saying to yourself, wait a minute, Michael, isn't that pretty much what you asked last Saturday? Answer, yes. Saturday generated huge voting, tens of thousands, and a 90-10 result of people saying, no, when all is said and done, we're not going to be in a better position. I worded it differently today, and I said specifically, put aside his methodology and what you think of him personally. Might we end up in a better position, having improved our trade standing with China, most importantly, and with many other nations around the globe? Not the way that we would have liked to have seen it done, right? But might it end up better? And I'll be doing a comparison of today's vote to the Saturday result to see if now, 5-6 days on, people feel differently about it, given what we've just, fingers crossed, weathered. Okay, I said there's a lot going on today. Please go vote at Smerconish.com. Setting aside criticism of Trump's approach and style, do you believe his tariff policies will ultimately benefit the United States? Look, in the modern era, I know we've had NAFTA, I know we've had other trade agreements, and they have been focal points from time to time, but no president, as I've been paying attention for the last 30 years plus, has ever made this such a priority. And maybe you're saying for good reason, because everything was fine and dandy. I don't think that it was fine and dandy. I think there needed to be renegotiations. Would I have done them this way? I would not have. In the same way, I would not have handled my NATO partners the same way. I would not have browbeaten Zelensky. I would not have thrown civil liberties to the wind while trying to strengthen the border. I mean, a whole host of things where time and again, I find myself saying, I share that objective, but not the means to getting there. Go vote. Setting aside criticisms of Trump's approach and style, do you believe his tariff policies will ultimately benefit the United States? Like and subscribe. Thank you, gang. Like and subscribe and set yourself up for notifications. Okay, Jamal? Please do that. And Joe, I'll see you later on the program. Okay? See you, gang.